From Manhattan, Kansas, it's time for Public Occurrences with Jason Beats, the online public affairs show with in-depth world news and analysis you won't find anywhere else.
Welcome to Public Occurrences. I'm Jason Beats. This episode of Public Occurrences covers refugees, armed conflict, and sexual violence. Tens of thousands of Central American children have traveled to the United States fleeing gang violence in their home countries. Since last October, more than 57,000 unaccompanied minors have been detained crossing the U.S.-Mexican border. Around three-quarters of the children were fleeing violence in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. The Obama administration plans to send many of the refugees back to their home countries. Australia may soon send refugees who attempted to travel there to Cambodia. The two governments are currently negotiating a deal to send up to 1,000 people to Cambodia. The refugees are currently being held in an Australian migrant detention center on the Pacific island of Nauru. Joyce Chia, a researcher at the Centre for International Refugee Law at the University of New South Wales, believes the refugees should be allowed to live in Australia. She said it would be far cheaper for the Australian people, it would be a better outcome for human rights, it would be more legally compliant, and it would be better for these refugees who have been extensively traumatized by their incarceration. If the deal goes through, around 150 refugees would remain at Australia's detention center in Nauru. Opposition lawmakers in Cambodia have ended a year-long boycott and returned to the country's parliament. The Cambodia National Rescue Party began the protest after it alleged widespread voter fraud in the 2013 parliamentary elections. During the boycott, the National Rescue Party supported protests and strikes for higher pay by workers in Cambodia's clothing production industry. The standoff ended after the ruling Cambodia's People's Party agreed to share leadership positions on committees in the lower house of Cambodia's parliament. Two leaders of the Khmer Rouge have been found guilty in Cambodia of crimes against humanity. They were sentenced to life in prison. More than 1.7 million people died in Cambodia under the rule of the Khmer Rouge from 1975 to 1979. The defendants plan to appeal their verdicts. Somrithi, who lost his father and three siblings under the Khmer Rouge, hugged another survivor after the verdict was delivered. The Dalai Lama says he should be the last person to hold that title. If a new Dalai Lama is not chosen, it will end a centuries-long religious tradition. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism. The religious leader told a German newspaper, "We had a Dalai Lama for almost 5 centuries. The 14th Dalai Lama now is very popular. Let us then finish with a popular Dalai Lama." He added, "Tibetan Buddhism is not dependent on one individual. We have a very good organizational structure with highly trained monks and scholars." The Dalai Lama fled from China to India after a failed Tibetan uprising against Chinese rule in 1959. Buddhists believe in reincarnation. The Dalai Lama also said, "I hope and pray that I may return to this world as long as sentient beings' suffering remains. I mean not in the same body, but with the same spirit and the same soul." Tens of thousands of protesters, led by Pakistani politician Imran Khan, are demanding the resignation of Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Imran Khan is a former cricket star. Cricket is a game similar to baseball that is popular in Pakistan. Khan alleges the 2013 elections that brought Sharif to power were rigged. Protesters took control of the Pakistani state television channel on September 1st, briefly taking it off the air before the Pakistani military gained control of the building. According to Reuters, when the soldiers entered the building, many protesters smiled and shook hands with them. It remains to be seen what role Pakistan's military will play in the resolution of the standoff. Generals have forced Nawaz Sharif from his position as prime minister twice before. The military is also upset with the prime minister for his decision to try former military dictator Pervez Musharraf for treason. The U.S. has launched airstrikes against the militant group Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. The Islamic State began as one of many rebel groups fighting against the government of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. The group quickly captured the Sunni parts of Iraq this summer. The Wall Street Journal reports the Syrian government facilitated the growth of the Islamic State by deciding to focus on fighting more moderate rebels in order to make other countries choose between itself and the Islamic State. Syria's foreign minister says Syria is ready to cooperate and coordinate at the regional and international level in the war on terror. I discussed the Islamic State, then known as ISIS, and the Syrian Civil War last year with Public Occurrences contributor Matt Spooner on episode 38 of Public Occurrences. A link to that episode is in the description below. Artillery fire hit a dynamite factory in eastern Ukraine. It is unclear whether Ukrainian troops or pro-Russian rebels were responsible for the attack. The explosion came hours after a renewed ceasefire was signed between the two groups. The attack occurred during the agreement's 24-hour grace period. Over 3,000 people have died in the conflict so far. Thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in Moscow to criticize Russia's military involvement in Ukraine. Protesters chanted, "No to war," and "Stop lying." Organizers stated the purpose of the rally was to denounce Russia's aggressive foreign policy. Valentina Melnikova, national director of the Russian organization Committees of Soldiers' Mothers, estimates 7,000 to 8,000 Russian troops are fighting in Ukraine. Melnikova says her calculations are based on information from families whose husbands and sons were sent on drills close to the Russian-Ukrainian border and then stopped sending messages back home. Melnikova says, military commanders are conducting a secret special operation. The Russian government denies sending troops to Ukraine to fight, instead claiming some Russian soldiers have fought in Ukraine as volunteers. The Russian government has designated Committees of Soldiers' Mothers as a foreign agent, saying it has received foreign funding and is engaged in political activity. The organization says it has relied entirely on funding by the Russian government since late June. A 20-year-old Palestinian college student gave advice on Twitter to protesters in Ferguson, Missouri, on how to deal with tear gas. Miriam Barghouti wrote, "Solidarity with Ferguson. Remember to not touch your face when tear-gassed or put water on it. Instead, use milk or Coke. Always make sure to run against the wind and keep calm when you're tear-gassed. The pain will pass. Don't rub your eyes. Ferguson solidarity." Other Palestinians also tweeted support for the Ferguson protests. Activists gathered in Ferguson to protest the police killing of Michael Brown, an unarmed young black man. The circumstances surrounding the shooting are disputed. A grand jury investigation into the shooting is ongoing. On September 15th, President Obama awarded the Medal of Honor to a soldier from Oklahoma who died in the Vietnam War. According to the U.S. Army, in 1970, a soldier in Donald Sloat's squad tripped a wire, which triggered a booby trap and activated a grenade. The U.S. military account of the battle says Sloat could hit the ground and seek cover, or pick up the grenade and throw it away from his fellow soldiers. After initially attempting to throw the grenade, Sloat realized detonation was imminent, and 2 or 3 men near him would be killed or seriously injured if he couldn't shield them from the blast. In an instant, Sloat chose to draw the grenade to his body, shielding his squad members from the blast, saving their lives. Sloat died as a result. He was 20 years old. The Center for Disease Control has released the results of a survey on sexual violence in the United States. While the results were just released, the survey was conducted in 2011. Over 12,000 participants completed the survey, which relies on self-reporting. This is the first major survey on sexual violence since a similar survey was conducted in 1995 and 96. The survey found 19% of women and 2% of men in the United States have been raped during their lifetime. The survey also found 44% of women and 23% of men experienced some other form of sexual violence in their lifetime, such as being made to penetrate, sexual coercion, unwanted sexual contact, and non-contact unwanted sexual experiences. The report found a majority of victims experienced their first victimization before the age of 25, with a substantial proportion experiencing victimization in childhood or adolescence. The report recommends teaching children and teens relationship skills, saying, "The early promotion of healthy relationships while behaviors are still relatively modifiable makes it more likely young persons can avoid violence in their relationships." Most of the non-Afghan prisoners previously held by the U.S. have been transferred from the U.S. military prison in Bagram, Afghanistan. The U.S. government claims the prisoners at Bagram are enemy fighters that can be imprisoned for the duration of the war to prevent their return to the battlefield. The same legal basis is used to detain prisoners at the U.S. military prison in Guantanamo. 14 Pakistani prisoners were transferred to their home country in September. The transfer was announced by Justice Project Pakistan, a legal group which represents many Bagram detainees. The organization worries the prisoners may continue to be imprisoned by the Pakistani government. Including these prisoners, 39 Pakistanis have been transferred from the prison in the past 10 months. 2 Yemeni prisoners detained at Bagram were released in August. The United States turned over control of the Afghan prisoners at Bagram to the Afghan government in 2012. 13 non-Afghan prisoners continue to be held by the U.S. at the prison. No prisoners have been released from Guantanamo since May. That was when the Obama administration traded 5 Taliban prisoners for Bo Bergdahl, a U.S. soldier held captive by the Taliban. The House of Representatives voted to criticize the administration for not giving Congress the 30 days advance notice of the transfer required by law. An Obama administration official said the secrecy was necessary to protect the American soldier's life. I have profiled 43 of the prisoners at Guantanamo for my blog National Security Stories. National Security Stories can be found at jasonbeats.blogspot.com. I interviewed former Guantanamo defense attorney David Fracht about his experience defending child soldier Mohammed Jawad at his war crimes trial in episode 45 of Public Occurrences. Here is a link to that episode. This weekend, I attended the South Central Broadcasting Society Conference in Edmond, Oklahoma. At the conference, I met and networked with students and broadcasting professionals from across the region. At the awards portion of the conference, I accepted all of the awards for Kansas State University because I was the only student from the college to go to the conference. Episode 41 of Public Occurrences was a finalist in the Audio News Program category. That episode was an interview with Shengyi Wang, a Chinese student at K-State. We discussed China's one-child policy and Shengyi's experience growing up in China and going to college in the United States. A link to that episode is in the description below. I'm Jason Beats. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Public Occurrences.